Okay, so welcome everyone. Let's get started. So this is a briefing on what we've done this summer, on all things that we've changed about the career coach. A lot of the things will be working behind the scenes and you won't notice a lot of it, but we wanted to tell you anyway because some of them are, of course, interesting to know. Some other things are very obvious, and we start with the obvious ones first, which are the CFP metrics, the Career Fitness Profiler metrics. A Career Fitness Profiler is the new name, actually, of the Career Coach tool. It comes from our North American adventure that we did together with our Canadian colleagues, Laura, Colleen, Michelle, who are also here with us today, and Aaron, I'm sorry. So the Career Fitness Profiler, and we thought this was actually a better name, and we've added a couple of cool things, which were specific, we thought at first, for the North American market, but then in the end, it seemed to be a nice feature to have here as well. Keep in mind that you can still use the participant version of the old Career Coach report as well. Mm-hmm. Okay. Besides the Career Fitness Profile metrics, we'll also touch upon the new pitfalls, which is also a more obvious feature. And then the release notes will go into other things that we've changed, which might be good to know. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Taking the chat box, what it is. Okay. So with the Career Fitness Profiler, we've developed 3 new metrics. These new metrics come from a bit our experience with our North American students, and also feedback we got from a Canadian partner, from Philip van Houten, and from people in the US we've talked to, saying that it's interesting for them to have one overall metric to start with. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, but the feedback we got is that a lot of the coaching in the US is sort of performance oriented as well. So people just want to get ahead in their careers, and they want to know how they're doing. And that's the whole idea behind the career fitness metrics. Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, that's correct. Yeah, and it's a good starting point for a coaching conversation for sure.
Indeed. So that's indeed how it should be interpreted as well. It's supposed to be the start of a coaching conversation, and then it's up to you coaches, of course, to provide more nuance and depth to the interpretation, because after all, it's just a metric. Yeah? It takes a couple of things into account, but it's still just a metric, and there's a lot more interpretation to it. There's 3 metrics, and for all of you who are acquainted with the old career coach model, I've listed those metrics with I've mapped them onto the old parts of the report. It's not always a 100% fit.
I think you're going to record it. So
okay. I'm getting some chatter here. I'm going to mute a couple of people, and if you want to talk again. Okay. I don't know where it's coming from. Okay, so, I'm sorry. So the first metric is the career focus metric. So of course, we have an overall metric, which is called the career fitness index, which is sort of an overall index of how good you're doing in your career. And then it breaks down into 3 more specific metrics, which all have a different meaning, of course. The first metric is the career focus. Basically, it maps onto the values part of the old report, as you can see with the 12 arrows there. The career power is a second metric, and this relates to mostly the attitudes. So there's some other things that go into it. We'll touch upon those right away. But mostly it comes from it maps onto the attitudes, and the career energy maps onto the energy stress balance. Okay, so if we dive into the first one, can you see the entire slide, or do you also have like I have on the right side, everyone's faces?
No, we don't see the entire slide.
This is better, right? Can you see it now?
No, there's no change. The only thing is,
It's Laura here. I can see the entire slide. It looks clear on my end. I don't know about others.
it's okay now, but I don't see you, Walter, anymore, but I see the slide, so.
Yeah. Well, they're more interesting to look at right now than I am, I think. So let's focus on the slides first. So the career focus, what does it say? There's a lot that goes into the career focus metric. This is all, of course, a bit more background information so that you know, and you don't always have to tell this, I think, in your feedback discussions, but it's good to know. So the first one, the career focus, is a metric which tells you, on the one hand, how pronounced someone's career values are. Think of the 12 arrow picture. And so the one we see here on the right-hand side. Can you see my cursor, my mouse moving as well? My cursor move?
Yes.
Okay, so okay, good that works. So it's this 12 flag or 12 arrow picture. The less pronounced it is, so that's the logic behind this metric, the less pronounced it is, the flatter it will be. So the closer all of these arrows will be to the middle. And even, so you can even have cases where it's all to the right or all to the left. Then this metric will also tell you what's actually the relief, the difference between the smallest and the largest values. So that's the basic of this metric, which is also used, for instance, in certain career interest scales and so on, and which tells you, is it a flat profile or not? So the career focus, on the one hand, the first thing it tells you is how pronounced is your career orientation. And of course, a second thing we'd like to know is also how focused you are. And that's the case where if all the interests are to the right, so if there's someone who is just interested in everything and they don't make clear choices, that's also not as interesting from a career development point of view, because, well, basically you can't have it all. So, or you'll need a lot more time to develop your career to, or put a lot more effort into it to have it all. So that is actually what it starts from. So the formula is quite simple. We had a couple of iterations on this, and in the end, we ended up with something which was quite simple. So the IT liked the solution a lot, and it conveyed the meaning that we wanted in there. So if you go to the second button here, it's the 4 highest minus the 4 lowest career values on a 10 scale. So if we go back here, it's the top 4 that we see on the right side here, minus the top 4 on the lower side. So it would be these 3 on the left side plus one of these values which scores a 5. So it tells us a bit how big is the differentiation in this profile, and then we've mapped that. And we looked back at the sample we had, and then we looked at, okay, how is this distributed across a sample? So if we take this formula, how is that distributed across the sample? So it's still compared to the entire sample according to a normal distribution. So it's still on a 10 scale. Does that make sense to you guys? If you have any questions, interrupt me. That's what this is for.
No, it's clear. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. A second thing we've added is if we're talking about your career focus, there's also, of course, a bit the perceived career focus. We've given that a lot less weight than the first part, but it's still in there. Yeah, so how in tune are you with what you want in your career? So how high is your sense of purpose? That is taken into account in this metric. I guess that makes sense to you, because your sense of purpose, of course, as we all know, that is how well do you know what you want and how assertive are you at defending it? Especially the assertiveness is an added value on top of what we had in the first part of the formula, because you might be very pronounced at what you want, but if you're then not assertive in defending this, if by the first opportunity that comes along or the first order that comes down from your boss, you switch ideas, that's not a good sign. That's not good for your career focus. Yeah. And then the last part, which both Leslie and I, we both agreed on this. This was a very important aspect also, is that your career focus can be very clear, but it can be very clearly extrinsically motivated, which is less preferable, as opposed to someone who is clearly intrinsically focused. So that is the third part that goes into the formula. I don't know it by heart anymore, but I think the weights are about 60%, 20%, 20% in the formula. So that 60% of the score is based on your the highest versus the lowest values. 20% is based on your sense of purpose, and another 20% is based on your intrinsic versus extrinsic balance. And it's also a quite simple formula that we've used here, that it just measures your intrinsic minus your extrinsic motivators, because we don't necessarily see extrinsic as something bad. So if you're high on extrinsic motivators and high on intrinsic motivators, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If it means you're unfocused, that will get punished in the first part of the formula. That all still makes sense?
It makes sense, yes.
No questions?
No, thanks.
Okay, so I'm glad that it's clear for you guys. That was a career focus.